She was his wife, but she had become invisible. At the grand ball at Everleigh Hall, Cordelia Beaumont stood near the marble pillars, watching her husband, the Duke of Ashwick, dance with Lady Rosamond. His hand rested at the lady's waist, his head inclined toward her as if sharing a secret. A smile touched his lips, a smile he had never once given to his own wife. Cordelia's chest tightened. A nearby voice, thick with idle curiosity, asked, "Your Grace, your new Duchess is lovely. How is married life?" The Duke's reply floated over the music, cold and clear. "She serves her purpose." The words struck like a blade. She served her purpose. Not she is my love, not she is my heart, just a tool for political gain. Cordelia pressed her gloved fingers to her stomach, feeling the ache of 6 months of quiet hopping shatter into dust. No one noticed the Duchess slip away from the ballroom. No one noticed her climb into the carriage alone, the velvet seat cold against her trembling body. She did not cry. The tears would not come. Only a hollow numbness settled in her bones, as if a candle inside her had been snuffed out. She had been so foolish. She remembered the day they met, only a week before the wedding. Julian Ashwick, the Duke of Ashwick, had arrived at her father's estate with the precision of a business transaction. Her father, Viscount Langley, needed the Duke's political influence. The Duke needed her father's votes in the House of Lords. Cordelia had been the quiet, graceful bridge between them. But she had been a girl with a heart full of hope. Julian had looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, and something in her had whispered, "There is more beneath the ice." He had spoken to her with cool politeness, yet once, when she had mentioned her love for illustrated botany books, his gaze had flickered with something unreadable. She had clung to that flicker. On their wedding night, he had come to her chambers not as a lover but as a stranger fulfilling a formality. He had stood by the fireplace, his back to her, and said, "This marriage is one of convenience. I expect nothing from you but your name and your presence at necessary functions. You will have every comfort, every freedom, but do not expect more." Cordelia had nodded, her voice steady while her heart cracked. "I understand, Your Grace." He had left without touching her hand, and yet she had still hoped. In the months that followed, she had tried. She had arranged his favorite dishes without being asked. She had learned the names of his tenants and their troubles. She had worn the colors he once offhandedly remarked suited her. She had waited in the drawing room each evening, hoping he would sit with her, speak to her, see her. He never did. Sometimes he would nod at her across the dinner table, exchange a few words about estate matters, and then retreat to his study. The house, Ashwick Hall, was vast and beautiful, but it echoed with silence. The staff was kind, but they could not fill the emptiness that grew inside her. And now, after overhearing his words at the ball, the last frail thread of hope snapped. When the carriage arrived at Ashwick Hall, Cordelia stepped out into the cold night air. She did not wait for her husband to return. She walked up the grand staircase, her slippers making no sound on the marble, and entered her private sitting room. She unpinned her hair, let the dark waves fall around her shoulders, and stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked pale, her eyes too large, her mouth set in a line of quiet despair. She whispered to the empty room, "I will not wait any longer." The next morning a strange thing happened. A small, unexpected hope flickered again, despite her resolve. Julian appeared at the breakfast table, which was unusual. He rarely joined her. He sat across from her, his expression unreadable, and pushed a leather-bound book across the white linen. "I came across this in London. I recalled you mentioned an interest in rare botanical illustrations. You may have it." Cordelia's heart, against her will, gave a foolish leap. The book was exquisite, filled with hand-painted plates of flowers she had only dreamed of seeing. She looked up at him, searching his face for some sign of warmth. "Thank you, Julian. This is beautiful. You remembered." He merely nodded and returned to his newspaper, but that small gesture rekindled a dying ember. Perhaps, she thought, he is not as cold as he appears. Perhaps he is simply reserved. Perhaps in time he will care. She spent the rest of the day in a daze of renewed hope. She placed the book on her nightstand and traced the cover with her fingertips. She would try again. She would be patient. She would show him that love could grow even from a marriage of convenience. That hope lasted exactly 3 days. She had gone to the conservatory to cut fresh flowers for his study. As she approached the open door, she heard his mother's sharp voice inside. The Dowager Duchess of Ashwick was a woman of iron opinions and little warmth. "Julian, you must secure the Langley vote for the bill. That is the only reason I agreed to this match. Have you ensured the girl's cooperation? She seems overly sentimental." Julian's voice came, calm and distant. "I have managed her. I gave her a book she once mentioned. She believes I listen. That will keep her content and useful." Cordelia's fingers went numb around the stems of the flowers. The petals scattered on the stone floor. Managed her. Content and useful. The book was not a gift. It was a leash. He had remembered not out of affection but because he needed her compliant. She turned silently and walked away. The corridor stretched endlessly before her, and with each step the last ember of hope died. She did not cry. She did not tremble. She simply felt something inside her close, like a door shutting quietly, never to be opened again. From that day forward, Cordelia stopped waiting. She no longer sought him out in the evenings. She no longer arranged his meals or lingered at the dinner table hopping for conversation. She stopped wearing the colors he liked. Instead, she wore what pleased her, soft lavenders and pale greens that reminded her of spring meadows. She stopped writing the small, hopeful notes she used to leave on his desk. The silence that had once pained her now felt like armor. Ashwick Hall was large enough for two people to live entirely separate lives, and Cordelia began to fill hers with purpose. She turned her attention to the village on the estate's edge. She visited the tenants, learned their names and their worries. She discovered that the local school was in disrepair, its only teacher elderly and struggling. Without hesitation, Cordelia rolled up her sleeves, metaphorically at first, then literally, and began to help. She organized repairs. She taught the younger children their letters. She sat with the elderly and listened to their stories. The people of Ashwick Village began to speak of her with genuine affection. The Duchess, they said, was kind. The Duchess, they said, had a gentle heart. Among the villagers, she met Dr. Nathaniel Hale. Nathaniel was a widower, a man of quiet strength and warm brown eyes. He had come to the countryside after the death of his wife, seeking peace. He ran the small infirmary and often helped at the school. When he first met Cordelia, he treated her not as a duchess, but as a woman of intelligence and compassion. He did not bow with practiced formality. He simply smiled and said, "You've made a difference here. The children talk of you constantly. They say you draw the best flowers." Cordelia laughed, a real laugh, the first in what felt like years. "I only draw what I see. Nature does the hard work." Nathaniel's eyes crinkled. Then nature is fortunate to have such an admirer. It was not flirtation. It was simple, honest appreciation. And Cordelia, starved for genuine connection, found herself looking forward to their conversations. They would walk through the village discussing the children's progress, sharing books, laughing at small jokes. He never expected anything from her. He simply saw her. And seeing was something she had not felt in a very long time. Weeks passed. The Duke of Ashwick began to notice something was different. At first, it was small things. The evening drawing room felt emptier. His meals arrived without the little touches she used to ensure, the fresh flowers, the particular jam he favored. He would walk past her sitting room and find it dark, the fire unlit. She no longer appeared to bid him good night. He told himself he did not care. He was a duke, a man of influence and restraint. He had married for political alliance, not sentiment. Her withdrawal should have been a relief. It meant she had finally understood the boundaries of their arrangement. But the silence began to grate on him. One evening he found himself standing outside the schoolhouse. He had not planned to go there. His horse had simply carried him that direction during his ride. Through the window, he saw her. She was sitting on a low stool, surrounded by children, a book open on her lap. Her face was lit with animation, her smile wide and genuine. She looked happy. And beside her, leaning against the windowsill, was Dr. Nathaniel Hale. The man was watching Cordelia with an expression that Julian recognized instantly. It was admiration, deep, warm admiration, the kind of look a man gives a woman he finds extraordinary. Something twisted in Julian's chest, something sharp and unfamiliar. He turned his horse and rode away, but the image stayed with him. That night at dinner, he studied his wife across the long table. She ate quietly, her gaze distant, her movements calm. She was polite, perfectly, formally polite, the kind of politeness one gives a stranger. "You have been spending much time in the village," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Cordelia looked up, her expression serene. "Yes, the children needed help, and Dr. Hale has been most welcoming." The name sent a prickle down Julian's spine. Dr. Hale. "Yes, he runs the infirmary, a good man." She said it without guile, as if stating a fact about the weather, but Julian heard the warmth in her voice, a warmth she no longer offered him. He said nothing more. He finished his meal in silence, then retreated to his study. But he did not work. He stood by the window, staring into the dark gardens, and felt a cold, creeping sensation he could not name. It was jealousy, pure, bitter jealousy. He did not recognize it at first because he had never allowed himself to feel it. But it grew. It grew when he saw her walking with Nathaniel near the orchard. It grew when a footman mentioned how the Duchess and the doctor had spent an hour discussing a new book. It grew when he saw Nathaniel's hand briefly touch her elbow as they stepped over a puddle, and she smiled up at him with easy familiarity. Julian had never touched her elbow. He had never made her smile like that. The realization was a slow, corrosive burn. He began to watch her. He noticed the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was reading, the way she hummed softly when she arranged flowers, the way the villagers' faces brightened when they saw her. She was not merely fulfilling a duty, she was beloved, and he had never seen it. One afternoon he found her in the garden alone. She was sitting on a stone bench, sketching in a small book. He approached, his footsteps crunching on the gravel. She looked up and her expression did not change. It was pleasant but utterly closed. "Julian," she said, her voice even. He stood before her, feeling oddly off balance. "I have not seen you at breakfast these past weeks." She closed her sketchbook. "I have been occupied with Dr. Hale." She did not flinch. Among other things, the village requires much attention. He felt a muscle in his jaw tighten. "People are beginning to talk." "Talk?" She tilted her head. "About what exactly?" "About the Duchess of Ashwick spending so much time with a country physician." The words came out harsher than he intended. Cordelia's gaze did not waver. "Dr. Hale is a friend. He treats me with respect. He listens when I speak. He does not view me as a tool for political maneuvering." She rose, her posture graceful and steady. "If that is a subject for gossip, then I pity those who gossip." She walked past him and he caught the faint scent of lavender. He stood frozen, her words striking him like stones. She knew. She had heard his conversation with his mother. Shame flooded him, hot and suffocating. He should have gone after her, he should have explained. But what could he say? The truth was ugly. He had used her, he had dismissed her, he had treated her as nothing more than a means to an end. And now someone else was seeing the woman he had ignored. The weeks that followed were a slow, agonizing reversal. Julian found himself seeking her out, only to be met with cool distance. He brought her a new book, an even rarer volume on exotic plants, and she accepted it with a polite thank you that held none of the bright joy of before. He arranged for a dinner party, hoping to see her shine as hostess, but she moved through the rooms with mechanical grace, her smiles reserved for the villagers and once for Nathaniel Hale, who had been invited at her request. That evening, as the guests mingled, Julian overheard Nathaniel speaking with the local vicar. "The Duchess is remarkable," Nathaniel said softly. "I have never met a woman with such a quiet strength. She deserves far more happiness than she receives." The vicar nodded sadly. "A pity the Duke does not see it." Julian's hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to storm over and demand they stop speaking about his wife, but he had no right. He had forfeited any right to her happiness the moment he had said those cruel words. The breaking point came on a gray, drizzly afternoon. Cordelia requested a private meeting with him in his study. She entered with a letter in her hand, her face pale but composed. She sat across from him, not as a wife seeking comfort, but as a woman delivering a quiet verdict. "Julian," she began, "my father has written to me. The political situation has shifted. The votes you needed are no longer essential. Your alliance with my family has served its purpose." He stared at her, a cold dread pooling in his stomach. "What are you saying?" She placed the letter on the desk between them. "I am asking for a separation, not a scandalous one. I would simply move to the Dowager Cottage on the north side of the estate. We can tell society I require country air for my health. You will be free. I will be free." The words were rational, calm, and utterly devastating. He could only shake his head, his throat tight. "You wish to leave." "I wish to stop being a ghost in my own life." Her voice trembled for the first time, but she steadied it. "I have tried, Julian. I tried so hard, but I cannot live in a house where I am not seen. I cannot pour my heart into a man who will never open his. I have found some small purpose in the village, and I will continue that, but I cannot continue this." She rose and he shot to his feet, his heart pounding. "Cordelia, wait." She paused at the door, looking back at him. Her eyes were sad but dry. "For what? What could you possibly say now that you did not say 100 silent days before?" He had no answer. The truth was trapped behind walls he had built so carefully. He watched her leave, and the study felt like a tomb. That night he did not sleep. He paced his chambers, replaying every moment of their marriage. He saw her hopeful smiles in the first weeks, the way she had arranged his desk, the small notes she had left. "I hope your day is kind to you." He had ignored them. He had ignored her. He had been a fool. The next morning he learned that fever had broken out in the village. A bad one. Several children were ill, and the doctor was overwhelmed. Without hesitation, Cordelia went to help. Julian stood at the window and watched her carriage disappear into the gray mist. "Your Grace," his steward said hesitantly, "the Duchess should not go. The fever is dangerous." Julian's blood ran cold. "Prepare my horse." He rode hard, the rain soaking his coat, fear clawing at his chest. When he reached the village, he saw chaos. Mothers weeping, men carrying water, and at the center of it, Cordelia. She was in the infirmary, her sleeves rolled up, her hair escaping its pins, her face pale with exhaustion. She held a child's hand, whispering soothing words. Nathaniel Hale worked beside her, but Julian only had eyes for his wife. She looked fragile and unbreakable all at once. He strode inside, his voice rough. "Cordelia, you must leave. You'll fall ill." She barely glanced at him. "These people need me." "I need you." The words tore from him, raw and desperate. The room went quiet. Nathaniel looked between them with quiet understanding. Cordelia paused, her hand stilling on the child's brow. Julian stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I have been blind. I have been proud and afraid and cruel. But you cannot leave me. Not like this. Not when I have only just begun to see what I was throwing away." She looked at him with a weary sadness. "Julian, you do not love me. You love the idea of possession. You see another man's kindness and it pricks your pride. That is not love." "It is more than pride." He reached for her hand and she let him take it, though her fingers were cold. "I was afraid. I was so afraid of feeling anything that I pushed you away before you could hurt me, before I could lose you the way I lost once before." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He swallowed, the confession scraping his throat. Years ago, I loved a woman who left me for a richer title. It nearly destroyed me. I swore I would never be vulnerable again. When I married you, I saw you were everything good, everything bright, and I panicked. I told myself it was only a political match. I told my mother cold things to convince myself, but I was lying. I have loved you since the first ball I saw you, before the marriage was even arranged. I sketched your portrait that night, hidden in my study, because I could not get your face out of my mind. She stared at him, her lips parting in shock. You loved me. I never stopped. I was a coward. His voice was thick with tears he did not shed. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am begging you, do not risk your life to escape me. Let me protect you. Let me try. Before she could answer, a child cried out in pain and Cordelia turned back to her work. Julian did not leave. He stayed. He fetched water. He held lanterns. He knelt beside her and helped cool feverish brows. For 3 days and 3 nights they fought the fever together. On the 3rd night, Cordelia collapsed. She fell into Julian's arms, her body burning with fever, her strength finally spent. He carried her back to Ashwick Hall, shouting for the physician, his heart splintering with terror. He did not leave her bedside. For hours he sat holding her hand, his forehead pressed to her knuckles. He spoke to her, though she could not hear. He told her about the sketch, now yellowed in his desk drawer. He told her about the way she laughed with the children, how it had broken him open. He told her he was sorry, so deeply sorry, for every cold word, every silence. Nathaniel Hale arrived and worked tirelessly. At one point the doctor looked at Julian with a grave expression. She is fighting, but she needs a reason to keep fighting. Speak to her. Let her hear you. Julian leaned close to her ear, his tears falling onto the pillow. Cordelia, I was wrong. I loved you too late, but I love you with everything I am. If you wake, I will spend every day proving it. I will walk beside you. I will listen. I will never make you feel invisible again. Please, please come back to me. A long, terrible silence followed. Then in the pale light of dawn, Cordelia's fingers twitched in his. Her eyelids fluttered. Her voice was a whisper, thin as thread. You sketched me. He laughed, a broken, joyous sound. Yes, terribly. You were much prettier in life. A faint smile touched her cracked lips. I want to see it. He pressed his lips to her forehead, not caring about the fever. You will see everything. I will hide nothing from you again. She closed her eyes, but this time it was sleep, healing sleep. The crisis had passed. Recovery was slow, but it was filled with small, precious moments. Julian brought her the sketch and watched her trace the lines with trembling fingers. He read to her from the botany book, his voice low and steady. He brought flowers from the garden and placed them by her window. He told her every day that he loved her. One afternoon she was strong enough to sit in the garden. Julian sat beside her on the stone bench, their hands entwined. She looked at him, her eyes still tired but full of a new light. You said you loved me from the first ball, she murmured. Why didn't you ever show it? He let out a long breath. Because I was terrified. I had convinced myself that love was a weakness, that if I let myself care, I would be destroyed again. I thought distance would keep me safe. Instead, it nearly destroyed the only good thing I had. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I stopped loving you, Julian, at least I thought I had. I had to survive. His throat tightened. I know. But I think I only buried it. She looked at him, her gaze soft. I do not know if I can trust you. It will take time. Take all the time you need, he said fiercely. I am not going anywhere. I will wait for you, Cordelia, the way you waited for me. Only this time you will not be alone in the waiting. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and the gesture was tentative, fragile. But it was a beginning. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. There were awkward silences and moments of doubt. But Julian kept his promise. He joined her in the village. He got to know the tenants. He even sat in on her lessons at the school, a powerful duke learning the names of children and the habits of flowers. Nathaniel Hale, with a gentleman's grace, stepped back, recognizing the love that was slowly rebuilding. He told Cordelia once with a sad smile, "He is a fool who finally woke up. Give him a chance to be wise." She did. One evening, as autumn painted the gardens gold, Julian led her to the conservatory. It had been restored, filled with rare plants from her book. He had done it in secret, a gift not of duty but of love. She stood in the center, turning slowly, her eyes brimming. "You built this for me," she whispered. "I built it for us," he said, coming to stand behind her. "A place where we can grow things together." She turned and looked up at him. "I am not the same woman who married you. I am stronger now. I will not be managed." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I do not want to manage you. I want to stand beside you. I want to be the man who deserves your smile." She placed her hand over his. "Then earn it every day." And he did. In the end, love was not a sudden blaze but a steady flame, kindled from ashes and tended with care. The Duchess of Ashwick became known not for her cold husband's neglect, but for the partnership they built, a duke who walked through the village with his wife on his arm, a woman who laughed openly and lived fully. They were not perfect, but they were real. And every night before sleep claimed them, Julian whispered against her hair, "I see you, Cordelia. I will always see you." She would smile, her heart no longer a closed door but a garden in bloom, and answer, "I know. I see you too." And that was enough. That was everything.